Good morning, everyone. I am the Reverend William Levwood. My pronouns are he and him. I'm affectionately known as Rev Lev, and I'm so happy that you decided to start off 2025 by joining us this morning. Whether you're joining us online or in person, let us all center ourselves for worship by taking a deep breath. We open and welcome to the ancestral people of this land, acknowledging that our church, like all of Burke, rests on the unceded territory of the Manahoac people of the Great Sioux Nation. We seek healing and the realization of justice with the people of this land who live on in their descendants, the present-day members of the Monacan Indian Nation, the Patawomic Indian Tribe of Virginia, and the Piscataway Indian Nation. We honor the ancestors as we move toward healing so that all together shall one day know full justice.
For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are.
Happy New Year, everyone. So we're going to kick off 2025 by exploring for a month, as we always have a monthly theme. We're going to explore the theme of story. I feel like we could spend a whole year exploring story, but we're just going to explore story for a month. Next week, stories are really foundational, and we're going to look at that a little bit today and about how our personal stories can be woven into and in dialogue with these foundational societal stories. But next Sunday, we're going to look at what is our core Unitarian Universalist story. I'm not sure that we do such a good job as Unitarian Universalists of really defining that story, and I think we need narrative to really fit ourselves into and to make our faith dance and come to life fully. So next Sunday, we're going to look at what that core Unitarian Universalist story might be. And then the following Sunday, the day before the inauguration, is also the day before Martin Luther King Jr. Day. We always focus on MLK on that Sunday, but I think it's all the more important this year, and I think that Martin has some important things to tell us, to remind us of, that can help us in the coming year, 2 years, 4 years. So that'll also be a multi-generational service, as every third Sunday of every month is a multi-generational service, because it's so important for us to be knit together as a whole community, and particularly for the children and youth. Research shows that that's one of the best ways for them to form their faith and to stay Unitarian Universalist when they grow up also, which doesn't happen all that often. I was raised Unitarian Universalist, and the joke is that people who are raised Unitarian Universalist either leave the tradition or they become ministers. Which is a funny joke, but not actually a funny reality at all. My preacher's kid wants to say something, but I'm gonna skip over you, Haya, for this one. We will have an opportunity for members to share in that last Sunday of the month, when we're going to have people reflecting, short reflections on the stories of their lives. But before we get to that, we're going to have today's service. Again, we're going to look at these foundational stories, but especially how our individual stories fit into that. is at the center of Unitarian Universalism. Love is the practice of our living tradition. As Unitarian Universalists, we covenant to help everyone flourish with dignity, honor the web of life, be beloved community, cultivate generosity, celebrate diversity, and transform the world with love. I'm so excited to have Michelle Anderson as our new Director of Spiritual Development.
So today, we're going to be reading Boundless Grace, which is by Mary Hoffman, and pictures are by Caroline Finch. It's adapted.
Grace lived with her ma and her nana and a cat called Pawpaw. Next to her family, what Grace liked best was stories. Some she knew, and some she made up. She was particularly interested in ones about fathers because she didn't have one.
You do too have a father, her ma said when she caught Grace talking that way. I must have told you 100 times about how we split up and your papa went back to Africa. He has another family now, but he's still your father, even though he doesn't live with us anymore.
Well, that wasn't Grace's idea of a father. She wanted one like Beauty's, who brought her roses from the beast's garden in spite of the dangers. Not one she hadn't seen since she was very little and only knew from letters and photographs.
In her school reading books, Grace saw that all the families had a mother and a father, a boy and a girl, and a dog and a cat. Our family's not right, she told Nana. We need a father and a brother and a dog. Well, said Nana, I'm not sure how Pawpaw would feel about a dog. And what about me? Are there any Nanas in your school books? Grace shook her head. Do I have to go then? Asked Nana. Of course not, Grace said, hugging her. Nana hugged her back. A family with you in it is a real family. Families are what you make them, she said.
One day when Grace got home from school, she saw a letter on the table with a crocodile stamp on it. Guess what, Ma said? Your papa sent the money for 2 tickets to visit him in Africa for your spring vacation, and Nana says she'll go with you.
Grace and Nana left for Africa on a very cold, gray day, kind of like today. They arrived in the Gambia in golden sunshine, like the hottest summer back home. Outside the airport was a man who looked a little like Papa's photo. He swung Grace up in his arms and held her close. Grace buried her nose in his shirt and thought, I do remember.
When they reached their father's home, there was the biggest difference of all. A pretty young woman with a little girl and a baby boy came to meet them. Grace said hello, but couldn't manage another word all evening. They make a storybook family without me, she thought.
The next day, Grace started to get to know Nana and Bakari. The children thought it was wonderful to have a big sister all the way from America. And Grace couldn't help liking them too. But she had to feel cross with someone. Grace knew lots of stories about wicked stepmothers. Cinderella, Snow White, Hansel and Gretel. So she decided to be cross with Jatu. I won't clean the house for her, thought Grace. I won't eat anything she cooks. And I won't let her take me into the forest.
Later, Papa found Grace in the backyard. He sat beside her under the big old jackfruit tree. This is where my grandma used to tell me stories when I was a little boy, he said. Nana tells me stories too, said Grace. Did she ever tell you the one about how your ma and I came to split up? Asked Papa. I know that one, said Grace, but I don't want to hear it right now. And she covered up her ears. Papa hugged her. Would you like the one about the papa who loved his little girl so much that he saved up all his money to bring her to visit him? Yes, she said, I'd like that one. Okay, but if I tell you that story, will you promise to be nice to Jatu? Asked Papa. I'll try, she said.
The days of Grace's visit flew by. She played in the ocean with her brother and sister, and she told them a bedtime story every night. She told all the stories she knew, Beauty and the Beast, Rapunzel, Rumpelstiltskin. Sometimes Ma called from home, and her voice made Grace feel homesick. I feel like gum, stretched out thin in a bubble, she told Nana, as if there isn't enough of me to go around. Seems to me there is enough of you, Grace, said Nana. Plenty to go around. And remember, families are what you make of them.
Soon, it was their last evening, and there was a big farewell party. Later, Grace asked Nana, why aren't there any stories about families like mine that don't live together?
Well, at least you've stopped thinking it's your family that's wrong, said Nana. Now, until we get back home and find some books about families like yours, you'll just have to make up a new story of your own.
I'll do that, said Grace. And when we're home again, I'll write it down and send it to Jatu to read to Nena and Bakari. The whole family came to see them off at the airport. Grace was sorry to say goodbye to her new brother and sister and even to her stepmother, but leaving Papa was hardest of all.
Waiting on their plane, Nana asked Grace if she had thought any more about her story.
Yes, but I can't think of the right ending, said Grace, because the story is still going on.
How about they lived happily ever after? Asked Nana.
That's a good one, said Grace. Or how about they lived happily ever after, though not all in the same place?
Stories are what you make them, said Nana.
Just like families, said Grace.
Homestretch is perhaps the most successful ministry to homeless people in the United States. Whereas most homeless ministries, like one I saw on the web recently, count themselves lucky to succeed with 25% of their clients and hope to go to 30%. Homestretch is closer to 90%. And that's still in their own home, providing for their own finances 2 to 7 years later. Barfonts Baldwin, the executive director of Homestretch, is here this morning to talk to us about Homestretch.
Well, good morning. Good morning. Gosh, it may be cold outside, but my heart is warmed. I just want to say thank you. Before I tell you about Homestretch, thank you for your hospitality. It is vast, I'll tell you that. I feel like a family member here. During Pastor Revlev's centering words, he talked about what's to come and the stories and how he hopes that you all can make your faith dance. Well, I'm here to tell you, you've already succeeded. Your faith is dancing. And I just want to say thank you for your hospitality. And then thank you for your partnership to Homestretch. I was talking to John this morning, and I did a little digging and research. This is only my first full year at Homestretch, and so I'm still out in the community getting to know our friends and our partners. And I have to say that Accotink Universalist Church has been a dear friend to Homestretch for 10 years. You all have partnered with Homestretch since 2014, and you've given over $10,000 cumulative. That's just the church, not the parishioners. Yes, that is a resounding applause that warms my heart. $10,446 to be exact. That's not only impactful, but that's a faith that dances. And I just want to say thank you again for just showing your love and your hospitality to an organization located in Falls Church, 35 years in service. And the first thing we do is provide a key to a home for those experiencing homelessness. Homestretch provides transitional housing for about 2.5 years to parents with children experiencing homelessness in the Northern Virginia region. We have 52 units in our portfolio, and it ranges from apartment style to townhomes, but what we want to do is show hospitality, grace, and compassion. We recognize that when you are homeless, all hope is seemingly lost. But once they get with Homestretch and partners like you, we bring transformation and hope and resilience to those that we serve. We provide everything as soon as they walk through the door with everything that they need, from a fully furnished unit to things for the children, to things in the kitchen so that they can cook and to really know what it's like to be on their own, but yet still supported by a support group like Homestretch and you. But in addition to a home, we provide employment services, workforce development. We have a housing navigator so that we can help find market rate housing, which is getting to become a scarcity here in this region. We also have a preschool called KidStretch. And so everything that's needed for the family to break the cycle of generational poverty in their lives is certainly possible when they connect with us. Regrettably, Jamie was going to join me this morning. She's a recent graduate, but she gave me consent to tell her story. Jamie is a mom of 3 children, and when she joined Homestretch, she had 2 children and was in a high-risk pregnancy with her 3rd child. She fled domestic violence, and the situation got so bad that she just took her children, and everything they could fit in one of the children's backpack. They slept in the car. They had nowhere to go, and they were over in Falls Church in their car. And she called that an adventure, because she wanted the children to not lose hope as she was losing hope day by day. Somehow she connected with Homestretch, and she was able to receive that care and that compassion, that warmth, that hospitality that I spoke of. 2 years later, Jamie and her 3 children are happy and they are thriving. She graduated and now they're in an apartment of their own. She was able to get stable housing as well as stable employment. Because she was in a high-risk pregnancy, she wasn't able to work. And then she found part-time employment but was underemployed. But our workforce development department just stood beside her and walked through that journey with her. And I'm just happy to say that not only does Jamie and her 3 children, they live in a safe and secure environment, but she's also working and thriving and providing not only a roof over her head and food in their bellies, but she's providing safe and secure housing for her and her family. Services like that are only possible with partners like you. Again, I just want to say thank you and blessings to you for providing hope and restoration to those who need it most. Thank you so much.
Far Away Nearby by Rebecca Solnit. What is your story? It's all in the telling. Stories are compasses in architecture. We navigate by them. We build our sanctuaries and our prisons out of them. And to be without a story is to be lost in the vastness of the world that spreads in all directions like an Arctic tundra or sea ice. We tell ourselves stories in order to live, or to justify taking lives, even our own, by violence or by numbness or the failure to live. Tell ourselves stories that save us, and stories that are quicksand in which we thrash, and the well in which we drown. Stories of justification, of assuredness, of luck, and star-crossed love. Not a few stories are sinking ships, and many of us go down with these ships even when the lifeboats are bobbing all around us. We think we tell stories, but stories often tell us. Tell us to love or to hate or to see or to be blind. Often, too often, stories straddle us, ride us, whip us onward, tell us what to do, and we do it without questioning. The task of learning is to be free, requires learning to hear them, to question them, or to pause and hear silence, to name them, or to become the storyteller. Thank you.
So as Rebecca Solnit articulates so wonderfully, societal stories provide the architecture for our lives. And in that way, societal stories are like an ecosystem. The societal stories we inherit and live within may be ecosystems of scarcity or abundance, of drought or gentle rain or monsoon. And stories also guide us, sometimes with an almost imperceptible nudge, other times a heavy, oppressive push. Stories are both the landscapes of our lives and the path we journey on through that landscape. And these stories may be true or false, life-affirming or death-dealing. We need stories. To be without a story, Solnit reminds us, is to be lost in the vastness of a world that spreads in all directions like Arctic tundra. Without stories, life is directionless, overwhelming, harsh. And yet, as Solnit also writes, stories can be the quicksand in which we thrash, can be a sinking ship in a stormy ocean where we drown. The task of learning to be free, she writes, requires learning to hear the stories, to question them, to pause and hear silence, to name the stories, and then to become the storyteller. So I want to invite you into a practice this morning. It comes from Priya Parker, who's the author of the book, The Art of Gathering. She shares a practice of narrating one's life through 7 songs. A person can do this on their own or with a small group, with family or close friends, or fellow members of a UU congregation, perhaps. When done in a small group, each person takes an evening, and for an hour or so, they share their 7 songs and the significance of each song in the story of their life. When we dialogue with songs, which are a kind of foundational story, when we wrestle with them, when we embrace them when they feel true or push against them when they don't, through that dialogue, we can become the storytellers of our own lives. So about a month ago, I decided to try this practice. I started by looking back on my life and the songs that were important to me at different times. And it didn't take long for me to have a list of 7 songs, each emblematic of a period in my life. But I kept the process going. Maybe you could say I have a tendency to overdo things. I made a playlist for every one of the 7 songs, a whole playlist made up of other songs by the same artist. Making those playlists helped to clarify what was at the core of each of these eras in my life. And in the end, only of the original 7 songs, only 2 or 3 remained on the final list. I'm hoping that sharing a little bit about my 7 songs helps you to reflect on your life. I hope that it helps you to name the central themes in your life, to dialogue with those themes, and to become more fully the storyteller of your own life. So the first song on my 7 songs playlist is from Prince. Prince was so important to the formation of my identity when I was an adolescent. I chose this song, If I Was Your Girlfriend, because of the way Prince explores gender bending. He isn't a girl in the song, but he wonders how his relationship with his romantic interest might change if he were. He sings in an androgynous voice, imagining a deeper intimacy might be possible because the boundaries of gender are removed from the relationship. Those scripts of gender are altered and adapted. Now that song is just one of many examples of Prince's playful exploration of gender. In voice, in fashion, in dancing, Prince was a chameleon, shape-shifting from a seductive machismo strut to a childlike, happy-go-lucky prancing to a feminine hip-shaking. And as the first of my 7 songs, this song tells something about my journey with gender, a journey in which I felt as chameleon-like as Prince, comfortable in my masculinity, my femininity, and everything in between and beyond those boundaries. I was working all that out as an adolescent, dancing in my bedroom in front of a mirror, trying on all those different Prince moves. So this song for me was a coming-of-age song, and I wonder if you have a song that's emblematic of your coming of age. If there's a song, if that song and its deeper themes continues to resonate through later periods of your life. My second song is from Tracy Chapman. I consider her first 2 albums to be some of the best albums ever made, stripped down to spotlight her voice and acoustic guitar playing. They're full of songs calling us to live into a world of justice for all. In the song Talking About a Revolution, she sings about how poor people are standing in the welfare lines, the unemployment lines, waiting for a promotion, and how the poor people are going to rise up and get their share, rise up and take what's theirs. She chronicles America's ongoing segregation of the poor in what she calls sub-city, where, quote, people live every day off the waste and decay, off the discards of their fellow man. These songs of Tracy Chapman awoke in me a commitment to social justice that my Unitarian Universalist faith primed me for. But it's the song, All That You Have Is Your Soul, that speaks to me most deeply and finds a place on my 7-song memoir. Because it's the commitment that matters most, and the commitment to justice that can be hardest to keep. Oh, my mama told me, she sings, because she said she learned the hard way. She said she wants to spare the children. She said, don't give or sell your soul away, because all that you have is your soul. I invite you to reflect on whether there's a song that connects you to a deep commitment in your life. Is there a song that reminds you to stay true to your most authentic self and your deepest values? Now, there's a funny monologue on a live album from Ani DeFranco where she shares that she, who also had very politically social justice-oriented songs, has been accused of moving away from them, focusing too much on love songs. And Ani jokes that this isn't a deliberate move, but that she just got, well, distracted. I don't know if I'm doing the monologue justice, but if you know it, it's iconic. And while I love Ani's more political songs, it's an Ani breakup song that makes my memoir in 7 songs. I guess you could say I got distracted too. As I'm sure is true for many of us, there is something particularly intense about a first love, a Romeo and Juliet kind of pathos. Ani's song, Both Hands, captures that experience for me. She sings, I am walking out in the rain, and I am listening to the low moan of the dial tone again, and I am getting nowhere with you, and I can't let it go, and I can't get through. Later in the song, she sings, I am watching your chest rise and fall like the tides of my life and the rest of it all. And your bones have been my bed frame, and your flesh has been my pillow. And I'm waiting for sleep to offer up the deep with both hands. I lost about 10 pounds in the month after that breakup. My face gaunt enough that my mother was hesitant to send me back to college for the second semester of my sophomore year. As I said, a little Romeo and Juliet, that first love, right? Of course, I did get through that hard time, thanks mostly to art making, dance making in my case, and thanks to the deep friendships I made and nurtured through the act of making art collaboratively with others. I collaborated with other dancers, with musicians, with visual artists, and through those collaborations forged some of the closest friendships of my life. I mentioned Prince earlier, but it wasn't just the music of Prince that got my body moving as I fell in love with dancing. It was Bobby Brown and Belle Biv DeVoe, Teddy Riley and Jodeci, Tony and Troop and Guy and Mint Condition, all those new jack swing artists who were mixing for the first time soul music with hip hop. And it was also later hip hop artists like Black Star and Common and Outkast, especially Outkast. Outkast, because Dirty South has something to say. That's all I got to say. Outkast has a song, Aquemini, a portmanteau of their astrological signs, the 2 members of Outkast, that's about the creative partnership between them. That song, that whole album really feels like what it felt like to have those deep creative friendships forged in collaborative art making. I actually moved from Charlottesville, Virginia, across the country, sight unseen, to a small hippie community started by Gary Snyder outside of Nevada City, California. And I was driving across country on the morning of September 11th, 2001. I woke up in a hostel near Arches National Monument Park in Moab, Utah. I'm watching it on the television with a bunch of strangers brought together by the tragedy. 9/11 is what's often called a before and after moment. It's a before and after moment in our national story, and there are before and after moments in our personal lives too. And a song can help us move through the trauma. The song Province by the band TV on the Radio was that kind of song for me in the wake of a family tragedy. I felt like the band was telling my story when they sang, "Suddenly, all your history's ablaze. Try to breathe as the world disintegrates. Just like autumn leaves, we're in for change, holding tenderly to what remains." And I needed them to remind me to hold my heart courageously because love is the province of the brave. And in the wake of that tragedy, there was a healing journey. And that healing journey, as most healing journeys, happened in community. Because healing needs community to happen. So I found a healing community in a Jewish renewal, Havurah, a small group at Congregation Neve Kodesh in Boulder, Colorado. I'm a religious leader now, but that period in my life was actually when I was most religious. I spoke last Sunday about how Hanukkah candles burning through the dark night kept me company in the wake of that tragedy. But that was just the beginning. The mourning traditions of Judaism gave me the scaffolding to eventually rebuild. I lit Shabbos candles with Havarim to start the Sabbath and Havdalah candles with Havarim to close the Sabbath. I went to a weekly Torah study with Rabbi Tirza Firestone, affectionately known as Reb Tirza, where we immersed ourselves in the wisdom of the Hasidic Rebbes. I chanted and prayed. In fact, for a year, on the bus on my way to work, I would pray the morning prayers, Jewish renewal and Rev Lev style, with poetic versions of the Ve'ahavta and the Amidah from poet Marge Piercy, who has readings in our hymnal, our gray hymnal. And then I would recite the afternoon prayers on the bus ride home, and after sunset in the deep blue dusk in my apartment near the downtown pedestrian mall, the evening prayers. And I don't know how many people might know of the Boulder, I lived in Boulder, Colorado at the time, musical artist Gregory Alan Isakov. Any Gregory Alan Isakov fans in the house? No? You should check him out. There was at that time a lot of music in my life, sacred music, Jewish chants and Sufi chants, Sikh chants and Kirtan chants. But the song that captures the feeling of the healing I found is in Isakov's The Stable Song. He sings at the beginning, "Remember when our songs were just like prayers, like gospel hymns that you called in the air. Come down, sweet reverence, unto my simple house and ring, and ring." Now, you won't probably be surprised that my seventh song is a Taylor Swift song. Not if you've been coming to this church for a while. The song didn't actually exist during the period that it represents, but Taylor's song, Robin, captures what it's like to be a child care provider or a preschool teacher or a parent, as we endeavor to create a sacred sanctuary for a child to be wild and free, to be protected from the challenges of life, the hardships, for just a little while. So that's 7 songs, but I have to include one honorable mention, because I can't have a 7 songs biography without something from Stevie Wonder. And the birth of my first and only child was the most extraordinary experience of expansive love I've ever experienced, and one that I continue to get to have over and over again. So my honorable mention, I include Stevie's song written for his daughter, Aisha, which means life in Arabic, just as my daughter's name means life or spirit of life in Hebrew. And I will share that in preparing this sermon, I discovered that there are a lot of covers of Stevie's song, Isn't She Lovely? Jazz quartet covers and jazz piano trio covers and solo piano and solo acoustic guitar covers, a Hawaiian reggae cover, a Frank Sinatra version that I could do without, personally. Another reggae version. If you have the time and or the need for some joy in your life, I listen to Stevie whenever I'm having a rough day. I recommend listening to covers of Isn't She Lovely for an hour and a half or so on whatever streaming service you prefer. So I have more life to live, right? It's hard to write the ending, just like it was hard for Grace in our story to write the ending. And I don't know what the future songs will be or which songs I'll remove from the list to keep the total to 7, but I look forward to finding out. I look forward to finding out even though some of the songs I know will be angry or sad or filled with longing, because life is full of all of those things. And I made my 7 songs list with popular music, but you could make yours with instrumental music, classical or jazz or world music. I know if I did the 7 songs practice with instrumental music, I would have a whole different musical memoir, one that would lift up different parts of my life that this 7-song memoir leaves out. So I want to encourage you, I really do want to encourage you to make your own 7 songs musical memoir. Maybe you even want to invite some friends or family over to share it with when you're done, and to invite them to make and share theirs too. I started with the music, but you could also start by thinking about the different songs, the different kinds of songs that make up a life. Maybe you too have a coming-of-age song, or a core commitment song like Tracy Chapman's All That You Have Is Your Soul, or a romantic relationship song of your own, or a friendship song, a healing song, a community song, a healing community song, a before and after song, or a different kind of turning point song. Those were some of the ones I had in my memoir, but maybe you have a divorce song, or a mourning song, an aging song. Maybe you have a connect with nature song, or a defining my faith song, or even a finding Unitarian Universalism song. And you could, of course, make your playlist biography out of something other than songs. You could choose novels or short stories, poems or paintings, 7 psalms instead of 7 songs. It's the reflective act that's the important part of the process. It's treating your life story as a sacred story, as sacred as any sacred scripture, as worthy of study as any Torah portion. Stories surround us like air, Rebecca Solnit reminds us. We breathe them in, we breathe them out. And rather than letting the stories be the unseen forces that tell us what to do, Solnit says, the art of being fully conscious in our personal life means seeing the stories and becoming their teller. Or you might say it this way, in the words of Tracy Chapman, don't be tempted by the shiny apple. Don't you eat of the bitter fruit. Hunger only for a taste of justice, hunger only for a world of truth, because all that you have is your soul. So may we honor the stories that make up our life. And for our soul's sake, may we reflect on those stories so that we become our own storytellers. Amen, 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 and blessed be.
And make our own days glad.
Okay, as we extinguish our chalice, I invite you to join me now in our community blessing with these words of David Bombeth. This church is dedicated to the proposition that behind all our differences, there's our diversity, there's a unity that makes us one and binds us forever together in spite of time, death, and the space between the stars. We pause now in silent witness to that unity. Now that we have gathered together in this welcoming and inclusive spiritual home, let us go out into the world nourished, rejuvenated, and inspired to share our values.